Aura had spent 300 years studying fear. She had seen it in 10,000 forms across 10,000 worlds. She had watched the wake screaming from dreams of cold vacuum. She had recorded the as they trembled at memories of fungal blooms that had nearly eaten their world. She had documented the who could not sleep without drugs because their ancestors had almost died. Every species in the galaxy feared something. This was a law as certain as gravity. Every thinking mind carried terror inside it like a wound that would not heal. The Galactic Consortium's Department of Psychological Wellness existed because of this truth. They helped species manage their fear. They created treatments and therapies. They kept civilizations from drowning in their own nightmares. Aura was good at her job. She understood fear better than most beings in the known universe. She thought she had seen everything. Then the human broadcasts arrived. The signals came from a small yellow star in an unremarkable spiral arm. The consortium had known about the species called humans for some time. They were new to space travel. They had not yet made contact with any other civilizations. Standard protocols said to observe them quietly and wait until they were ready. But the signals they sent into space were strange, very strange. Aura's team intercepted what the humans called entertainment. At first, the analysts thought they had found trauma documentation. Perhaps these were historical records of disasters. Perhaps they were archives of suffering meant for educational purposes. But the metadata was wrong. The production quality was too high. The lighting was too careful. The sound was too clean. And then Aura noticed the credits at the end. The humans had actors. They had directors. They had something called special effects teams. This was not documentation. This was fiction. Aura watched a human female walk slowly down a dark hallway. The music told the audience that something terrible was waiting. The human knew this. The audience knew this. Everyone knew what was coming. And yet the human kept walking. She opened a door. Something with too many teeth lunged at her from the darkness. The human screamed. The audience screamed. And then the scene cut to black and words appeared on the screen telling viewers to purchase tickets for something called a sequel. Aura stopped the recording. She sat very still for a long time. She watched more. She watched humans tell stories around fires about monsters that hunted them. She watched humans read books about terrible things happening to people like themselves. She watched humans pay money to sit in dark rooms together and scream at images on a wall. They called this fun. They called this entertainment. They called this a good time. Aura called an emergency meeting. The senior analysts of the Department of Psychological Wellness gathered in the main conference chamber of Station 12. There were representatives from 40 different species, all of them experts in the science of fear. All of them had reviewed the human broadcasts. All of them looked disturbed. Elder spoke first. His species had nearly been wiped out by solar flares 2 million years ago. They still could not look at bright lights without medication. These humans are clearly damaged, he said. Their psychological architecture has malfunctioned at a fundamental level. They appear to seek out the very stimuli that should trigger flight responses. This is a sign of severe collective trauma. Senior analyst disagreed. Her species had evolved from prey animals and understood fear responses better than most. Damaged minds do not create such elaborate content, she argued. This is not random dysfunction. This is organized, structured. The humans have entire industries devoted to producing this material. They have awards for excellence in causing fear. This suggests purpose, not malfunction. The debate continued for hours. Some analysts believed the humans were mad. Others believed they were broken. A few suggested that perhaps humans simply did not feel fear the way other species did, that their emotional responses were somehow muted or different. But Aura had studied the biological data. Human fear responses were not muted, they were intense. When a human experienced terror, their body flooded with stress hormones, their hearts raced, their muscles prepared for flight, Their pupils dilated, they sweated, they trembled. Humans felt fear deeply, perhaps more deeply than many species. And yet they sought it out. Aura stood and addressed the council. "I propose a contact mission," she said. "Direct observation has limits. We need to interview them. We need to understand what they are doing and why. This is not merely an academic question. If humans have found a way to process fear that we have not discovered, the implications could reshape our therapeutic practices for." Elder raised an objection. "And if they have not? If this is simply madness dressed in elaborate costumes? Then we will need to consider intervention," Aura replied, "before they spread their psychological contagion to other species." The council approved the mission. 3 months later, Aura stood in the observation deck of a diplomatic vessel as it approached the human. The planet was beautiful in a violent way. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling over everything. It looked peaceful from space. The data said otherwise. Earth was what the consortium classified as a death world. The gravity was slightly higher than galactic average. The atmosphere contained a corrosive gas called oxygen. The star bombarded the surface with radiation. The planet's magnetic field barely held back the solar wind. And that was just the environment. The life forms were worse. Earth had predators at every level, microscopic organisms that could invade a body and kill it from inside, insects that drank blood and spread disease, plants that produced toxins, reptiles with venom in their teeth, mammals with claws and crushing jaws, fish with rows of triangular teeth that could smell blood from kilometers away. Everything on Earth competed to survive. Everything killed to eat. The planet was a nightmare of constant violence dressed in pretty colors. And humans had evolved in the middle of it. Soft, slow, fragile humans with no natural weapons, no venom, no claws, no armor, no speed. They should have been food for everything else. Instead, they had conquered their world. They had learned to make fire. They had built walls and weapons. They had domesticated some predators and exterminated others. They had survived diseases that killed millions. They had spread across every continent, every climate, every environment. They had won. Aura looked at the beautiful blue planet and tried to imagine growing up there. She tried to imagine being afraid every day. She tried to imagine 200,000 years of genuine terror, of watching family members die to predators and disease and disaster. No wonder their minds were strange. The human delegation met them in orbit. Ambassador Wei was a small female with dark hair and dark eyes. She smiled when she saw the aliens, showing her teeth in a way that Aura's briefing materials said indicated friendliness rather than threat. "Welcome to Earth," Ambassador said, "or at least to our neighborhood. I understand you have questions about our entertainment." Aura had many questions. She had prepared a list of 412. "Yes," she said, "we would like to understand your horror media." Ambassador's smile widened. "Oh good," she said. "I was hoping you would ask about that. I brought samples." She held up a small device that contained, according to her, 3,000 years of human nightmares carefully organized by category. Aura looked at the device. She looked at the human holding it. She looked at the death world hanging in space behind them both. She had a feeling that the next few months were going to change everything she thought she knew about fear. The interview chambers on Consortium Station 12 were designed to be comfortable for carbon-based life forms. The temperature was neutral. The lighting was soft. The seats adjusted to fit almost any body shape. Everything about the room said that this was a safe space for honest conversation. Aura had conducted thousands of interviews in rooms like this one. She had spoken with trauma survivors from 100 worlds. She had listened to beings describe their worst nightmares, their deepest fears, their most painful memories. She knew how to recognize distress. She knew how to read the signs of psychological damage. Ambassador Wei showed none of them. The human sat comfortably in her adjusted chair, a warm drink in her hands, data drives arranged neatly on the table before her. Her vital signs were stable. Her hormone levels were normal. She appeared completely relaxed despite being surrounded by alien beings who were studying her species' collective psychology. "Let us begin with basics," Aura said. "We have observed that humans create and consume large amounts of content designed to induce fear responses. Can you explain why?" Ambassador took a sip of her drink. She seemed to be thinking about how to phrase her answer. "That is actually a complicated question," she said. "Do you want the simple answer or the real answer?" "Both," Aura replied. "The simple answer is that we enjoy it. It is fun. We like being scared when we know we are safe. It gives us a thrill." Aura made a note. This matched her initial hypotheses about sensation-seeking behavior, but it did not explain the elaborate nature of human horror media. "And the real answer?" Ambassador set down her drink. "The real answer requires some context about human evolution. Do you know much about Earth?" "We have studied the data," Aura said. "We know it is classified as a death world." Ambassador nodded. "That is an accurate classification. Everything on our planet wanted to eat us, poison us, crush us, drown us, or burn us. We were soft, slow, fragile prey animals with no claws, no venom, no armor. For 200,000 years, we lived in genuine terror every single day." Aura watched the human's readings carefully. Her heart rate did not increase. Her stress hormones did not spike. She was describing ancestral trauma as though it were merely interesting historical data. "The predators were bad enough," Ambassador continued. "Big cats that hunted us at night, wolves that worked in packs, crocodiles that waded in the water, bears that could crush a skull with one blow. But the things we could not see were worse. Bacteria that made our blood boil with fever, viruses that spread through villages and left no survivors, parasites that ate us from inside." She picked up her drink again. "And then there were the natural disasters, earthquakes that swallowed cities, floods that drowned continents, fires that burned everything we built, storms that tore the world apart, droughts that starved us slowly, ice ages that froze us out of our homes." Aura noted that Ambassador's voice remained calm throughout this recitation of horrors. "How did your species survive?" she asked. "By being afraid," Ambassador said. "Fear kept us alive. Fear made us run when we should run. Fear made us fight when we should fight. Fear made us check the shadows for predators. Fear made us stay away from sick members of our group. Fear was our most important survival tool." This aligned with the consortium's understanding of fear responses. All prey species evolved fear as a survival mechanism. "But then something changed," Ambassador said. "We learned to make fire. We built walls. We made weapons. We figured out how to grow our own food instead of hunting for it. We domesticated some predators and killed others. We developed medicine to fight disease. We learned to predict storms and earthquakes and floods." She smiled. "We won," she said. "We climbed to the top of our food chain, and then we kept climbing until we left our planet entirely. The predators are mostly gone now. The diseases are mostly cured. The natural disasters are mostly predicted. We are safer than we have ever been in our entire evolutionary history." Aura leaned forward, but the fear remained. Ambassador pointed at her. "Exactly. The fear remained. 200,000 years of evolution had built fear into our brains at the deepest level. Our bodies still expected to be hunted. Our minds still scanned for threats. Our nervous system still prepared us to run or fight at the smallest stimulus." She set down her drink and spread her hands. "And suddenly we had nothing real to be afraid of. We would jump at shadows. We would panic at harmless things. We would lie awake at night terrified of dangers that did not exist. Our fear responses were misfiring constantly because they had nothing to do." Aura began to understand. "Your fear became self-destructive." "Very much so," Ambassador agreed. We developed anxiety disorders, depression, paranoia. Our minds invented threats that were not there. We became our own predators, haunted by imaginary dangers. Some of us could not function. Some of us could not leave our homes. The fear that had kept us alive was now making us sick. She pulled up a file on the display. It showed a human film featuring a creature that did not exist, hunting humans in an environment that could not exist. So we gave fear a job again, she said. We pointed it at fictional monsters instead of letting it eat us alive from the inside. We learned to take our fear and aim it at something we controlled. We built elaborate games around the thing that terrified us most. Aura stared at the image on the screen. You domesticated your fear. Ambassador grinned. I like that phrase. Yes, we domesticated it the same way we domesticated wolves. We took something wild and dangerous and made it work for us. She played a short clip from the film. On screen, a human ran through a forest while something terrible chased him. The music built tension. The camera angles suggested threat. Everything about the scene was designed to trigger fear responses. When we watch this, Ambassador explained, our bodies react as if the danger is real. Our hearts race. We sweat. We tense up. Our stress hormones spike. But our conscious minds know we are safe. We know the monster is not real. We know we are sitting in a comfortable chair in a safe room. She paused the clip. And when the movie ends, we feel relieved. We feel triumphant. We survived the threat, even though the threat was never real. Our fear responses got their exercise, and then they calmed down. It is like taking a wild animal for a walk. You let it burn off energy so it does not tear apart your house. Aura sat back. She had studied fear for 300 years. She had never considered this approach. You use fictional fear to regulate real fear, she said slowly. Exactly, Ambassador confirmed. Our horror media functions as a kind of emotional gymnasium. We exercise our fear responses so they stay healthy. We keep them sharp enough to react to real danger, but trained enough not to overwhelm our rational thought. She pulled up more files. Images of humans gathered around fires, telling stories. Images of humans reading books with terrified expressions. Images of humans huddled together in dark theaters, screaming at screens. It also brings us together, she added. Shared fear creates bonding. When we scream together at a movie, we feel connected. When we tell scary stories around a campfire, we feel like a tribe facing the darkness together. Fear shared is fear divided. Aura thought about who medicated their fear away but felt more isolated than ever. She thought about who suppressed their ancestral memories and lost connection to their own history. You have found a use for fear that does not involve eliminating it, she said. Ambassador nodded. We could not eliminate it even if we wanted to. It is built into us too deeply. So we learned to live with it instead. We made it a part of our culture. We turned our greatest evolutionary burden into art. She smiled again, teeth showing. We learned to ride the lightning, analyst Aura, and honestly, we are pretty good at it now. Aura looked at the data she had collected. Heart rates, hormone levels, neural activity. Every measurement confirmed what Ambassador was saying. The human was discussing ancestral trauma and existential horror with the calm confidence of someone who had made peace with darkness. Not by defeating it, not by running from it, but by learning to play with it. One more question, Aura said. What do humans fear now? Ambassador's smile faded slightly. She was quiet for a moment. Being alone, she finally said. We fear that consciousness might be rare and precious. We fear that the stars might be silent because everyone else has already died. We fear that we might be the only ones who made it this far. She looked at Aura with something new in her eyes. We really hoped we would find someone else out here, she said. Aura felt something shift in her chest. For 300 years, she had studied fear as a problem to be solved. She had never considered it might be a bridge to be crossed. You are not alone, she said. Ambassador's smile returned, warmer this time. No, she agreed, we are not. The report took 4 years to compile. Aura and her team analyzed every piece of data, interviewed hundreds of humans, and conducted extensive experiments. They consulted with psychological experts from across the consortium. They debated interpretations and challenged assumptions. When they finished, the document was 3,000 pages long, but the conclusion could be stated simply. Humans had done something no other species in the galaxy had managed. They had not merely survived their fear. They had transformed it into a tool, a form of recreation, a source of connection and strength. The implications were enormous. Aura presented her findings to the Department of Psychological Wellness. She showed them the data on human stress responses during horror media consumption. She showed them the long-term studies on psychological resilience. She showed them the cultural analysis demonstrating how shared fear experiences strengthened social bonds. The department was skeptical at first. Many of them had spent their careers treating fear as a disease to be cured. The idea of deliberately inducing fear responses seemed dangerous, even irresponsible. But the evidence was undeniable. Humans who regularly consumed horror media showed better stress regulation than those who did not. They recovered faster from traumatic events. They reported higher levels of psychological resilience. They were more comfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity. And they were not alone. Within human culture, some individuals avoided horror entirely and reported no negative effects. The key was choice. Humans who willingly engaged with controlled fear experiences benefited from them. Humans who were forced to face fear without consent did not. The therapeutic implications are significant, Aura concluded. We may need to reconsider our approach to treating anxiety and trauma across all consortium species. The department approved a pilot program. They were first. Their fear of vacuum exposure had haunted them for millions of years. Every child was taught to fear the cold emptiness of space. Every adult carried that fear like a stone in their heart. The consortium's traditional approach had been medication and avoidance, were given drugs to suppress their fear responses. They were encouraged to stay away from viewports and space stations. They were treated as fragile beings who needed protection from their own minds. The human-inspired approach was different. A team of psychologists worked with human horror creators to develop a new program. They built virtual reality simulations of vacuum exposure. They wrote stories about ancestors facing the void. They created films in which characters confronted their deepest fears and survived. The simulations were carefully designed. They induced fear responses but maintained a framework of safety. Participants knew they were in a controlled environment. They knew they could stop at any time. They were given the choice to engage with their fear rather than being forced to face it. The results exceeded all expectations. After 6 months, participants reported significant reductions in baseline anxiety. They were more comfortable working in space-adjacent environments. They felt less burdened by their ancestral terror. Some of them even described the fear experiences as enjoyable. Not fun exactly, one participant explained, but meaningful. I faced the void and I survived. I am stronger now. The program expanded to other species. They had suppressed their memories of the fungal blooms for generations. They did not speak of the dark time when their world had almost been consumed. Children were not taught about it. Historical records were sealed. The entire civilization had agreed to forget. But forgetting had not healed them. The fear was still there, buried deep. It surfaced in nightmares that no one discussed. It manifested in irrational phobias that had no apparent cause. They carried their ancestors' terror without understanding why. The new program helped them remember safely. Storytellers began creating tales about the fungal blooms. They built them slowly, carefully, with plenty of distance between the audience and the horror. The stories acknowledged the terror but also celebrated the survival. They showed ancestors facing the darkness and finding ways to live. The response was overwhelming. Who had never understood their own fears finally had context for their feelings. Families discussed the dark time openly for the first time in generations. The collective trauma that had been festering in silence began to heal in the light of shared story. "We thought forgetting would protect us," a elder said. "But forgetting just made us alone with our fear. Remembering together made us strong." Not every species could adapt the human method. Some were too fragile. Their fear responses were too easily triggered into permanent damage. For them, the traditional approaches remained necessary. But for those who could handle it, the human approach was revolutionary. The consortium began training fear management specialists in the new techniques. They developed guidelines for creating safe horror experiences. They established ethical standards for inducing controlled fear responses. They built an entirely new field of therapeutic practice based on what humans had discovered by accident over 200,000 years of surviving a death world. Aura watched it all unfold with a sense of wonder. She had spent 3 centuries treating fear as an enemy to be defeated. Now she understood that it could be an ally to be respected. The final presentation to the Consortium High Council took place 5 years after the first human broadcasts were intercepted. The Great Chamber was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. They had all heard rumors of the new findings. They were eager to understand what had been discovered. Aura stood at the center of the chamber. Behind her, a massive screen displayed images from her research. Humans watching horror films, facing virtual vacuum, telling stories around community fires. "Fear is universal," she began. "Every sapient species experiences it. Every civilization must learn to manage it. For millions of years, we have treated fear as a disease. We have medicated it, suppressed it, avoided it. We have taught our children to run from the darkness." She paused. Humans took a different path. They evolved on a world that was trying to kill them every moment of every day. They lived in terror for 200,000 years, and when they finally conquered their external threats, they found that the fear remained inside them. The screen showed a human child watching a scary movie, clutching a blanket but unable to look away. They could not eliminate their fear. It was too deeply embedded in their biology, so they found another way. They learned to play with it. They built elaborate games around the thing that terrified them most. They turned survival horror into art form. The screen shifted to show humans gathered in a dark theater, screaming and laughing together. They did not conquer fear by destroying it, Aura said. They conquered it by domesticating it. They made it serve them instead of ruling them. And in doing so, they discovered something we had missed. She looked out at the assembled representatives. Fear shared is fear divided. Fear faced voluntarily is fear controlled. Fear transformed into story is fear given meaning. The humans did not find a way to live without fear. They found a way to live with it that makes them stronger instead of weaker. The council elder spoke from her elevated position. Her voice was ancient and carried the weight of civilizations. And what do the humans fear now? What could possibly frighten a species that has turned terror itself into entertainment? Aura thought of Ambassador Wei. She thought of that moment in the interview when the human smile had faded and something vulnerable had shone through. "They fear being alone in the universe," she replied. "They fear that consciousness might be rare, precious, and unspeakably fragile. They fear that the stars might be silent because everyone else has already died." The chamber was quiet. "But they are already writing stories about that too," Aura added. "They call the genre cosmic horror. They say it helps them sleep at night." A murmur ran through the assembled representatives. Many of them did not understand. How could contemplating extinction help anyone sleep? But Aura understood now. She had spent 5 years learning to see fear the way humans did. They face the worst possibility so it holds less power over them, she explained. They imagine the void so the void does not imagine them. They tell stories about the darkness because stories are how humans have always survived the darkness. She pulled up one final image. It was a recording from the first meeting with Ambassador. The human was smiling, holding up the data drive that contained 3,000 years of nightmares. The humans sent their horror stories into space, Aura said. They broadcast their nightmares to the stars. We thought it was a sign of psychological damage. We thought they needed our help. She let out a small sound that might have been a laugh. But they were not asking for help. They were offering it. They were sharing the tools they had built for surviving in a universe that does not care if you live or die. They were teaching us how to face the darkness without being consumed by it. The council elder considered this. You believe we should adopt their methods. You believe the entire consortium should learn to play with fear. Aura nodded. I believe we should learn from them, not copy them blindly but understand what they discovered. They found a way to take the worst part of being alive and turn it into something that brings them together. That is not madness. That is wisdom. She looked at the screen one more time. The humans are not broken, she concluded. They are survivors. And now that they know they are not alone, I suspect they will help us learn to survive too. The Council approved the integration of human psychological techniques into consortium therapeutic practices. It was not a quick process. It took decades to adapt the methods for different species. Many mistakes were made along the way. But slowly things changed. They began hosting festivals where they celebrated their ancestors' survival of the vacuum fears. They built museums dedicated to the dark time, places where the horror was acknowledged and transformed into pride. Other species developed their own approaches, their own stories, their own ways of playing with darkness. And the humans kept creating new nightmares to share with anyone who wanted them. Ambassador Ware remained involved with the consortium for many years. She helped train fear management specialists and consulted on cross-species horror media projects. She became known throughout the galaxy as the woman who had explained why humans like to be scared. Near the end of her career, she gave one final interview about her work. When we first met the consortium, she said, we thought we were going to learn so much from older civilizations. We thought they would have all the answers, but it turned out we had something to teach too, not despite our difficult history but because of it. She smiled, showing her teeth one last time. We came from a world that wanted us dead. We survived by learning to face our fears. And when we finally reached the stars, we found out we were not alone. That is the best story we have ever been part of. And honestly, it is a little scary not knowing how it ends. She looked at the camera with warmth in her eyes. But we have always liked being scared, she said. It just means we have something important to lose. The interview ended there. But somewhere in the galaxy, humans were already writing stories about what might go wrong when different civilizations met for the first time. They called it science fiction horror. They said it helped them hope for the best while preparing for the worst. And across 1,000 worlds, other species were finally beginning to understand what that meant.